The game changer formula is about a way that you can bring predictable success into your life. You may have heard the expression success leaves clues, and I think that that's really what the game changer formula captures. This is something that we could talk about for days.
You're listening to The Growth Booth, the show focused on achieving lifestyle freedom through online businesses. Whether you're looking for step-by-step strategies to start building an online business, simple game plans to grow your business, or proven lifestyle freedom frameworks, you are in the right place. Stay tuned and be sure to join the thousands of listeners already in growth mode.
Aidan Booth here, welcome to The Growth Booth. Today we are at episode 8 and I'm joined by a good friend of mine who, if I had to sum him up in one word, it would be inventive. He's done a whole bunch of interesting and I think quite crazy things over the years. For example, he's sailed the Atlantic twice on his own boat, which I think is absolutely insane. He's sold a couple of businesses for multi-million dollars, which I think is fantastic. He's managed to rescue someone out of a Bangkok prison, which I think is just mental, and I still don't quite understand how he managed to pull that off. He's done some other just things that people would never be able to do. For example, somehow he worked his way into attending the Grammys, and he's escaped from pirates off the coast of Africa, which is just terrifying in my mind, and many other amazing things as well. So Rory Prendergast, welcome to the call. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Aidan. I sound really great when you say all that stuff, right?
You sound great, and I think you've done some really amazing things. So just to paint the picture a little bit here and give people some background, I met Rory at a bar in Las Vegas, which is not all that unusual because he is Irish, so it's kind of his natural habitat to some degree. We were attending an e-commerce conference at the time that was hosted by my business partner, Steve Clayton. And as soon as I met Rory, I thought, God, this guy's a little bit different. I don't know if it was just because you were like unshaven from weeks at sea or what it was, but I realized that Rory was someone who, really sort of grabbed life by the horns and made things happen. And fast forward, God, how long was that? Must have been 12 years ago. Fast forward 12 or 13 years ago. And Rory and I have done quite a bit of business together. We've become really good friends. We've holidayed together with our families. We've built a franchise business, Pinpoint Local, with partners in the United States, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And Rory was the CEO of that company and really the mastermind in being able to do all of that in an incredibly short space of time. And I think most importantly, Rory is someone who I've grown to be able to rely on to give me some real good words of wisdom when they're most needed. So Rory is very much a friend in that regard. So I've been very excited to have him here on the show today. Now, we are going to dive right in. We're going to talk about a book that Rory published and some of the concepts from it. Now, the book is called The Game Changer Formula. You can pick it up on Amazon for like $10 or something. You can get it in print format, audio format, and I, by the way, have been through the book 3 or 4 times in both formats. And is there another format as well there, Rory?
There's Kindle as well, yeah. So print, Kindle, and audio, yeah.
Perfect. So print, Kindle, and audio. The Game Changer Formula is about a way that you can bring predictable success into your life. You may have heard the expression success leaves clues. And I think that that's really what the game changer formula captures. This is something that we could talk about for days. It's a really deep topic, I think, but I think we can also talk about it for 20 or 30 minutes and share some really, really good information with people. So Rory, maybe you could talk a little bit about the different ingredients of the formula and how that works. And then we can dive a little bit deeper into what each of the ingredients are and speak more about those.
Yeah, absolutely, Aidan. So thanks for that introduction. Like I never think of all those things, so when you say that, like, it makes me feel great. So that's good. But yeah, the game changer formula is something that kind of came together for me over a period of time because I felt that I was able to kind of build predictable success into my life in lots of different areas. And I just went to work at like, how do I break that down? Like, what are the elements that create predictable success? Because I wanted to try it out with a small group of people, which I did. And when I saw that developed predictable success from them, I went, haha, there's something in this, right? And so that formula that I created then is mindset plus energy plus accountability to the power of vision equals predictable success. So they're the main elements. And, as you say, we can kind of dive into any of those as you want, because I know they can mean anything to anybody,
Let's talk about mindset first. When you say mindset, what specifically are you referring to there?
It's a good question, because, everybody sees this differently. But for me, mindset is a kind of set of automatic thought processes that I go through in my head that actually ends up making me do something or not do something, if I want to put it that simply. So the way I look at this is that, like, we all have a mindset, right? Some of us, it's working really well for us. And for others of us, like, some of it's working well, and some of it's actually pulling us away from what we actually want to achieve. And so I think the first thing to understand is that we all have that mindset. And I kind of call that an operating system, right? So we all have an operating system, whether we like it or not. And we take automated actions all the time, whether we like it or not. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that my mindset, and anybody that's reading the book, that we can actually shift their mindsets so that the automated actions they're taking are bringing them in the direction they want to go, rather than what's happening in a lot of cases today. It's pulling you away from what you want to achieve.
So there's a really good image in your book, which I think captures this whole mindset idea, and it's a picture of an iceberg. And the point that's sort of out of the water is the conscious mind. And this is what we're aware of. But then there's this massive part underneath the water, which is the subconscious and unconscious mind. And I think this is a great way to look at it, because your conscious mind is only a small part of what triggers the way you think. In fact, it's probably the smallest of those three parts. So I think a lot of what you're talking about in the book and in other conversations that we've had, that there are things that you can do to start to adjust and modify the unconscious and subconscious, so that your operating system, as you put it, starts to be congruent and aligned with what you want to achieve. Would you say that's a more or less a representation?
I think that's absolutely right. And I think there's one element that might kind of gel this for people together, right? If you just think about it this way. So we think we're making our decisions with our conscious mind. Our conscious mind, we're as beings, like, we're trying to use as little energy as possible all the time, right? So we take in a certain amount of energy through food and that kind of thing, and we're trying to make it as efficient as possible. So our conscious mind is relatively inefficient. Our subconscious mind is really efficient. It can do like thousands of things at a time, right? And so our subconscious mind has kind of automatically created these ways of doing things that we don't even know we're doing. So we think we want to do one thing and we end up doing something else. Why does that happen? It's because our subconscious mind has been programmed to do that, been programmed for a long time. And so I believe that we can actually change that subconscious mind to be more congruent, as you say, with the goals that you want to achieve or the vision that you have for your own life.
I sometimes feel that if the subconscious and unconscious and conscious minds are not aligned with the vision that you have for your life, it's almost like you're trying to swim upstream. And it's like you're applying this brute force, you're kicking, you're moving your arms and you're swimming and you're making progress. But if you don't have the unconscious and subconscious minds aligned, if you don't have those mindsets aligned, then eventually you will always be pulled back to where the current is pushing you. One of the reasons why working on your mindset is so important, and I think it's an absolute no-brainer that it's part of your equation here. So if we look at some of the things that people can do to try to train their mind, or maybe adjust or be able to control a little more of the subconscious and the unconscious, what are some things that people can do there?
Well, I think the first thing, Aidan, is the very first thing is what we just did there, is to understand that we've got those two areas, right? And that the subconscious mind is driving probably 80% or more of what we're doing every day, right? So once you have that understanding, that starts to get you to think differently for a start. I think the second thing then is to look at where are these, I kind of call them stories, that are actually taking us off in these different directions. I like to say, like, this real oversimplification of everything, but the subconscious mind is the place that's full of stories. These are the stories that we've told ourselves over time, or that we've learned over time, that helped us at some point. And the subconscious mind then took that story on and say, okay, this is really going to work for Aidan because, 20 years ago, I learned that this kind of worked for me, right? And it probably did. But today you're a different Aidan, and today I'm a different Rory, and maybe that story doesn't work for me anymore. So we've got some stories that are working really well for us, and a lot of stories that are probably pulling us in the wrong direction. So if we can just identify those stories, it's very easy to actually change them. And we identify the stories by, one simple way of doing it is just listening to how we speak to others, but also listening how we speak to ourselves. So I might say to you, like, Aidan, we talked about bars and alcohol earlier on, and I might say to you, Aidan, yeah, if I go out, if I go to a party, I need to drink. Like, it's just the way I am. I need to do that to feel part of the party and to enjoy myself. And that's a story then that I tell myself. That story does not, bring me in the direction I want to be going today, let's say. And so I can change that story, and I can change it relatively easily. I can change it by creating a new story that replaces it.
And those stories so often turn into sort of triggers like, oh, I'm sitting down at the computer. I need to be having a coffee here. It may not be related specifically to you actually feeling like you need to have a coffee. It may just be a habit or a routine. And I think daily routines are a great tool that people can use to improve their mindset. I'll share a couple of other things that I do. Some of these I've taken from your book there. But if you've got anything else that you want to add quickly, we can do that. So I feel like the people that you hang out with are so important, because there's an old saying that you become your five closest friends. So the 5 closest friends that you spend the most time with, the way that they are ends up sort of rubbing off on you. So that's one thing that I often think about. Affirmations, but in a sense, the way that I use them, it's more like in a sense of reminders. And these are something that I work through every morning. And this is part of the daily routine. And we'll talk a little bit about this later that you go through. And meditation is one that I took on as a result of a conversation with you a couple of years ago. And I've done, God, I don't even know, but I typically do 5 short 10-minute meditations per week. And I've found them a great way to sort of center my mind, regain focus, and look at things through a more objective lens. Any other little tools or tidbits we could leave people with before I move on to the next ingredient there?
For me, having that kind of focus on, where it is you're going, we'll probably talk about that later, but like having this vision of where you're going and constantly reminding yourself of that all the time is a big help. I often look at, if you take all stuff you talked about there is brilliant stuff. And I kind of look at it this way, is that you need to become the kind of person who's going to achieve the goals that you're going to put out for yourself, right? And if you start to work on you as an individual, I mean, mindset is a big chunk of that. But if you start to work on you as an individual first, before you start working on those goals, everything's going to be a lot easier,
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, the second ingredient there is energy. When you talk about energy in this equation for predictable success, what do you mean by energy?
So what I mean by energy is like, what is the kind of traction that we're going to put onto everything, right? So it's, if we can have a fantastic mindset, right, that's kind of aligned to our goals and that kind of thing. But if we are not taking action every day to work on that road and kind of create this person who's going to achieve those goals, then we're not going to get very far, right? And we actually need, a substantial amount of energy to do that. And I'm talking about physical energy, and I'm also talking about, mental energy and focus. Because if we don't have that, it's so easy just to, not get enough done in order to get there. So for me, energy is really important. And that comes down to like really simple, basic stuff, like the kind of stuff we do anyway, but just doing it a little bit more focused, making sure that you eat the right food. And I don't try and tell people what food they should eat, but, people are smart enough to figure that out now. One thing people miss out on a lot of the time is how important hydration is. Like, I've always got water with me, because if you start drinking more water, you'll notice your energy level going up, and especially you'll notice that you'll be able to concentrate longer and that kind of thing. But then also physical exercise, right? Because when we exercise physically, obviously we get stronger, it creates more energy, but it allows us to focus better and work. But those other things you mentioned earlier on too, that daily routine and that meditation and all that kind of stuff as well impacts on our energy, impacts on our ability to focus for longer and that kind of thing too. So that's basically what I mean by energy.
The other one there, which I think is vitally important, is just sleep. And you talk about this a little bit in your book, but it's amazing how valuable that really becomes, and the detrimental impact that people can have when they don't get enough sleep. And again, just like food and exercise, people need to find what their own groove is here. But there have been studies that show that if people get 1 or 2 hours of less sleep than what their body needs, the chance of getting all kinds of illnesses skyrockets. The ability to focus on a task or be creative diminish amazingly, like exponentially. And the secret is just to sleep a wee bit more. And that's sometimes easier said than done, especially for people that are busy working, long day jobs, or people who've got families. But I think that when you make it a focus, when you realize there's a lot of good that can come from just getting a few more hours of shut eye each each day, it becomes a no-brainer. So sleep's a big one there. The other thing about exercise, you mentioned exercise. So obviously from a physical standpoint, I think this is really important for all the reasons everyone can imagine. But I find that it's equally as important for me from a mental standpoint as well. It really gets my creative juices going and oftentimes allows me to solve problems or just get past roadblocks, things that might be weighing on my mind. And as part of your formula, if I remember correctly, not the formula itself, but more like the daily routine, you've got exercise as something that you do sort of first thing in the morning. What does that look like for you?
Oh, so me, my exercise, the exercise piece in the morning is a 5K run. So I'm really lucky to live by a freezing cold sea here in Galway on the west coast of Ireland. And so I have a 2.5K run exactly from my house to the diving board in Galway Bay here. And so I do that 2.5K. That kind of warms me up enough to jump in that water. So these days, like at 6:30 in the morning, it's pitch dark, right? So I'm jumping into the sea at pitch dark, right? And then run home again to kind of warm back up. So that's my daily exercise routine.
What's how long are you in the water for?
These days, very, very short, very short. So I'm only in there for about 3 minutes these days.
Do you know what the temperature is?
I don't want to know what the temperature is.
No,
I don't know. But you know what? Like on a day like today, where in probably 3 degrees down there in air temperature this morning, the water actually feels warmer. It probably is warmer. The run home that kills you afterwards.
3 degrees Celsius is just a couple of degrees above freezing. So yeah, it's funny how when the air temperature is so cold, it does make it that wee bit easier. But at the end of the day, when you immerse your body into that kind of water, I mean, you've got to have a good reason for doing it. I think it's awesome. I haven't quite gotten to your point of doing it every single day, but I've certainly embraced taking those opportunities to do it when I can, whenever I go to the beach or a lake or river or whatever. When I'm close to that on vacation, I always make sure that I get up bright and early and go down for a dip, and also using cold showers, which is something else we can talk about at some stage. Have you tried using cold shower? I guess you don't really need to because you're in the sea.
Yeah, I would have a cold shower sometimes when I come out of the sea. If I had to get in my car and drive somewhere afterwards, then I'd have a cold shower there. But I don't have a cold shower at home or anything. But the other interesting thing, like when I go down there at 6:30 in the morning, right? So there's a space at the diving board that people can change in, and it's full. Like when I get down there in the dark, like there isn't space to put your towel down. It's crazy. Like, there's a lot of people doing it.
I think when you get up and get moving and do something like that, whatever it is, some kind of an exercise or cold water immersion, whatever it ends up being your thing, I feel like it's the best way to start the day. And I know for me, I feel invigorated, and at that point, I feel like I can do anything when I start the day in that way. Whereas if I look at the other alternative to just sort of, rolling out of bed, slowly getting going, spending half an hour on my phone and this, that, and the other, they're just like light years apart in terms of starting my day.
Totally. But you know what? I think the challenge here is when, and I don't tell people in the book like to go jump in the sea. It's not about that. Whatever exercise works for you. But when I wake up in the morning, if I was to think, Rory, you've got to get up now and run 2.5K, jump into the freezing cold water and then run back before you do anything else, I would say just no way. I'm not going to do that. Because I just don't feel like doing it when I wake up. But it's step by step. So it's Rory, you got to stand up, right? Okay, that's the first step. You got to put on your gear. Okay, I'll do that. And I don't feel like stretching then, but okay, you got to stretch. So I'll do that next step. And then once I feel like stretching, I feel okay, I go outside and it's really cold. So I go outside and I still don't feel like running, but if I take the first few steps, that's okay. By the time I get to the diving board, then I feel like going in for a swim because I'm warm, So, so it works step by step like that for me.
And I think so much of that is designing little triggers to get you going. So for me, for example, if I know I'm going to be doing a workout in the morning, and if I feel like, even if regardless of how I feel the night before, I'll leave my exercise clothing and my shoes in a place where I'm going to get changed so that I see them and it's just by default. And then once I've done that, that's a little bit like one of these triggers. Like, okay, I've got my exercise gear on now. I guess I should go and do some exercise. And it's amazing how much easier that makes it. And even if I'm not doing the exercise first thing in the morning, just by going through the motions of putting myself in that kind of mind space, it makes things so much easier. And I think that exercise aside, this can work for all kinds of areas in your life, from your relationships through to your work habits and so many more things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, the other thing that kind of gets me up there as well is, And I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute, but it's the accountability piece, because I'm kind of known now for jumping in the water every morning, right? So I'm in the sea every morning. So when I'm walking through town and I meet friends, they'll say to me, "How was the water this morning?" I can't say I didn't get in the water this morning. I can't do that, right? Because that's me, you know?
Yeah.
And even if I'm traveling, you know, and I'm in a different city and where I can't go for a swim, I feel bad if somebody calls me and say, "How's the water this morning?" I say, "Well, actually in Cork, I didn't go," you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so accountability is the next piece of the formula there. So far we've spoken about mindset and we've added energy to that. And the next ingredient is accountability. So what do you mean by accountability in your formula?
So what I mean by accountability is having somebody, you know, external who's going to be checking with you every day to make sure you're doing what you're doing. So, you know, in what I said a moment ago, I've got a community of people that expect me to be in the sea every morning, right? And so that's just one element. That's kind of accidental accountability, if you like. Like in the formula that I've created, I think that this is my theory and I've seen it work. You know, it's worked for you, it's worked for many different people. But if you implement like this process that I use in the morning, doesn't mean jumping in the sea, right? But if you implement that, you are going to have predictable success in whatever it is you're creating. And so all we need to do is make sure that somebody's checking with us that we're implementing that routine every day, because, you know, that is the key. Like that, if we do that, everything's going to work out okay. So this simplifies accountability altogether. And so I have one person that for the last few years, every morning I send him a text when I've come back from my exercise to tell him, yeah, I'm on track for the day. I've done all my stuff. If I don't send it to him, he's going to message me and say, "What's going on today?" You know, and likewise in the evenings when I plan out my day, which is another element of my routine. If he doesn't see the photograph of my plan that I send to him in the evening times, he's going to text me and say, where is it? I don't want to let him down. So that means I'm going to make sure I do this every day. And that's part of this whole formula, because it is like, what is success in the end? It's just like X number of days of continuous action in the right direction. And by having accountability, it makes sure that you show up for those days and you do what you're supposed to do.
I think there are some interesting hacks that we can all use to make that accountability a lot easier. For meditation, as an example, when I was getting started with meditation, I used an app called Headspace. And I must have used that app on my phone for the first, I would say, almost 2 years that I was meditating. And it was only recently when I decided that, you know what, I don't really need the app anymore. I know what I'm doing and I can do it in my own way. But the app had a counter on it, and it would say like how many days I've been meditating in a row, and it would give me these statistics, and that sort of allowed me to build the habit. And I think that building those habits around what you want to be accountable for is a really good hack. And the way that you do this is habits take like 30 repetitions or 60 repetitions or something, whatever that number is, to become a habit. And I think oftentimes, like getting up in the morning and doing something that might be difficult, achieving the point where you've got a new positive ability, whatever that is, positive action as a habit, is something that's really, really powerful. And you only have to string together, you know, maybe it's 30 days, whatever the number is, of repetitions in your life. And then all of a sudden, if you don't do it, it's like, oh my God, you know, why didn't I do, you know, what's happened? Something just doesn't feel right. So that's a way of building up that self sort of accountability. And I also think that different people need different levels of help with their accountability. And the important thing is knowing where you sit on that spectrum. So me, for example, I'm very much a self-starter, but in some areas of my life, I really do need or want to have an accountability partner. And for me, sometimes it's, you know, one of my team or a business partner or even a friend or even my wife in some areas of accountability. So I think it's about understanding where you sit on the spectrum. Now, you've worked with a lot of different people who must fit in all kinds of different areas of that spectrum. Is there any way that people can sort of figure out like how much they need that actual accountability partner versus just being able to maintain accountability themselves?
Well, you see, I kind of look at it a little bit differently to that, Aidan. And I think that accountability can be made so simple that you might as well just have it for all the time, right? And so in my kind of process that I use in implementing the game changer formula, like I have a way of doing accountability, right? You do it differently, fine, you know, that works for you. But I found that when people implement this, it works really well for them. It just keeps them on track with everything. And so for me, it's like having a specific accountability partner and having a very simple way of being able to check in with that person, which is like just one word or one thumbs up in a day. Like that's all it is on a text message. It's no more than that, right? And that person is not accountable back to you, right? So what I feel like, if you were accountable to me and I was accountable to you for something, let's say I dropped the ball, right? And you have to drop the ball the same day, the whole thing's going to fall apart, right? It always needs to be one way so that you can't break it together, if you know what I mean. And so we create these little structures sometimes of like, three-way accountability. So A is accountable to B, who's accountable to C, who's accountable to A. In my friend circle, that's kind of the way, or my friend's triangle, that's the kind of way we work it.
That's a good way of doing it. I think also with accountability, like so many of the things we're talking about here, you need, and it's important that you are being accountable to the right things. It's like you kind of have to have the right goal. Otherwise you're sprinting off in the wrong direction, and the goal could be anything, but you want to make sure that you are being accountable in a way that's aligned with your vision. And the vision is the next part of the formula. And I sort of feel like the vision is the most powerful part of the formula, but it's still limited by the other ingredients. So just to recap the formula there, we had mindset plus energy plus accountability to the power of vision. So if you've got a teeny tiny little vision, then you're not going to go much beyond just the raw, mindset limitations that you've got there. Talk us through vision a little bit. What do you sort of mean when you say vision? How can people think about vision?
Okay, so for me, vision is this kind of destination that we're heading for, right? It's a difficult thing to get across like in a few minutes on a podcast. So I believe that we all have a vision within us somewhere, right? And is it not a case of actually creating something? It's actually discovering what you have inside of you. So what it is that you want to achieve in your life. It's rare like that. I think that your vision would just be around, money, like make $1 million or anything like that. I think it's usually something much bigger than that. And often something that's maybe even hard to check off, like even hard to say, okay, I've done that. So, even simple things like, being the best dad I could be, for example, that's, very simplistic version of it, but you could never check that off, right? You could never say, yeah, I am the best dad I could be. There's always more work that needs to be done on it, So it's having this, like, I like to think of it as a destination. And so a lot of what I talk about in the book has come back to like my sailing experiences. And for me, that was like, having this destination that we're going to, being really clear about that and when we're supposed to get there, so that then I'm willing to put in the steps to make progress towards that. And, in the book, I talk about trying to make those 100 miles a day. So, every day, just get another 100 miles, get another 100 miles and get those under your belt so that you're actually getting closer to your destination. So vision, if I was to simplify it to something, it's the destination. It's where you're going.
I think it's incredibly powerful to go through one of the exercises that you've got in your book and just sort of map out on a piece of paper. And I did this a couple of times about where you want to get to, because I think a lot of people, they just take their vision for granted. And that's kind of like being on cruise control and ultimately getting to a destination. You do have the option of deciding and getting a bit more granular about where you want to get to. I ultimately got to something that's really simple in my mind for me to remember as my vision. I think about it every single day. I think about it first thing in the morning, and that's lifestyle freedom and memorable moments. And that is my vision for my life. And that means something to me far beyond what I could convey here, because it touches on my family, my business, my friendships, personal growth, and so much more. But I was able to get to that because I took the time to go through the process of really mapping out what my ideal life would look like in the main 5 or 6 different areas of my life. So one of those, for example, is parenthood. How do I want to be as a father? I feel like even the best can get better. What would the end game of that be for me? In your sort of process here, how are you able to sort of tap into the power of that vision on a regular basis? Is there something that you do to awaken that?
Yeah, there is. Very like what you say there, you touch in on it every day. And so for me, like my vision again is just simplified down to make bigger lives for 1 million people. Like, so that means something to me. I know it doesn't mean anything to people that are listening here, but I could break that out into like probably a half-day conversation with you, Aidan, like if you wanted to, like you kind of could with yours, right? And so that is, again, I check in with that every day, but I've also created for myself a visualization that kind of encapsulates that. So there's many different elements in that. And so let's just say two of the elements that are in that are, well, let's just say touch on three quickly, is my son, my friends, and my business partners, right? We just take those three. There's more to it than that. So I've created this visualization for myself where at my 100th birthday, I'm sitting in a room in this restaurant, and I could tell you exactly where it is and all that kind of thing. But in the room are all the business partners that I've had in the past and in the present, right? That means I've had to maintain good relationships with all those people. That's part of it, right? So they're there. They're my friends still. My friends are all there. I've managed to maintain my friendships with all those people, right? So that's another piece of work that I need to concentrate on. And my son is actually making a speech in that. And I'm really proud of how he's able to speak and that kind of thing. So I had to work that stuff with them, right? So there's just like a part of my daily visualization that I go through. I just run through this kind of film in my head of this picture, and I kind of go through it in the book in more detail. It's again hard to do in a few minutes here. That really helps ground me and makes sure that I'm focused on all those different roles, like you mentioned earlier on, about being the parent, being the friend, being the business partner, and all that kind of thing. So that's kind of one of my little tricks for doing that. The other one is just having it in a simple phrase that I can keep using all the time. My files are named after that. So there's a Make Bigger Lives file on it's my main folder on my computer. So that makes me think about that every day. It's like I've got my strategy has that at the top of it. And I just keep talking about it, and the more I talk about it, the more it becomes ingrained and the more focused I am on it.
I think this process of imagination is really, really important when it comes to unlocking some of the power of the mind and just being open to new ideas and thoughts. And visualization is something that I use as well. And if you want to see just how powerful this is, one of the examples you give in your book is if you sort of close your eyes there and then imagine for a moment that you're biting into a big, juicy lemon. And if you just imagine that in your mind, you will probably start salivating, or you'll have some reaction to. In fact, as I say this right now, it's happening to me. I'm like imagining this big juicy lemon like squeezing out into my mouth, and that's the power of imagination. And I think there's studies that have shown that your mind can't always differentiate between reality and imagination. And I think this is one of the reasons why it's so important. Just a personal story. About a year ago, I had a helicopter come and land on my backyard at my holiday home in New Zealand, and it picked up my dad and I along with my brother-in-law and his dad, and it flew us, must have been about 150 kilometers south to a beautiful wine region in New Zealand, which if I were to get there by regular means of transport, I would have had to drive about 100 kilometers over a mountain range, and then either fly across the Cook Strait, which is an area of sea separating the North and South Islands of New Zealand, or jump on a ferry, which would take a few hours. Now, I had this idea of chartering a helicopter for the day and doing this amazing wine tour with some of my family for the day. And that came to me when I was sort of forcing myself to think outside the square. It's not, in the scheme of things, it's not overly expensive to do something like that, but it's a memory that will stick with me forever. I remember that time when, my son was 4 years old and I was able to take him on a helicopter ride, and I was able to go with my dad to the South Island of New Zealand and do a day of wine tasting with a private guide and all that stuff. So that's an example of something that came to me when I sort of forced myself to think outside of the square a little bit. And it really ties back to the memorable moments part of my vision there. And I feel like in my mind and what works for me, the things I get the most enjoyment out of in life are those kind of moments. So if I actively seek to create more of those special moments, then I become happier. So that's an example of the kind of thing that can come out of this when you start thinking a little bit more about it. I've got another visualization. You mentioned yours, where I'm in a ski chalet in the French Alps, and it's an area that I know very, very well. I know the exact town and everything. I'm in this ski chalet. I've got adult kids coming in there. My wife is there. Some of our friends are there, and it's this incredible moment. Anytime I think about it, even if it hasn't happened, it brings incredible enjoyment and satisfaction to me. So I think imagination and the power of visualization and sort of fostering this vision is so important, and it goes way beyond any sort of airy-fairy guru preaching. There's some actual real science to it. So I think it's something really interesting that a lot of people are not really aware of that needs to be explored.
Yeah, I was just going to say one other thing there, Aidan, on that, right, as we were talking about vision, right? Because here we're talking about this whole thing is about predictable success, right? And you touched on something earlier on. You said you could have maybe a smaller vision or something, but really, like, if you think about this, if you're going to be able to have predictable success, well, you might as well make the biggest vision that you could have, right? That you could aim, because, you know, why would you not? You know, so it's really worth putting the time into figuring that out, because if you don't use, you said you're going to end up somewhere, you might as well end up where you really want to end up.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no saying that, you know, unless you can think about it or believe it, then there's no chance it's ever going to happen. Like, there's no chance I would have ever been able to go in a private helicopter unless I had that idea in the first place. So you need to be able to have that vision. So like you say, to your point, you may as well make that vision as exciting as you possibly can. Now, something that I found really useful to tie all of these different parts together it's like a daily, I think it's a 10-step sort of ritual or 10-step of reminders that you go through. And these are detailed much, much more in the book. So I would recommend that people actually get that. But let's just talk through those briefly.
First one is the mindset manual. So this is, you know, as we touched on earlier, the mindset, and it's like creating these new stories in your subconscious mind in order for you to be able to act in a way that's more congruent to you achieving your vision. So I don't think we'll probably go into the details of that, but basically they're kind of affirmations that are written in a certain way, just change the way we think, right?
I'm on my 5th mindset manual now, by the way. And this is really, it's one of those habits that's now built into my day. And I've got this little book that floats around with me, and I'm on my 5th one. So I'm definitely an advocate for that idea.
And it's a really simple idea. And the next thing then is the meditation. So this is, you know, you touched on it earlier on. So that's just the next thing I do in the morning is just kind of do my meditation. I do like 10 minutes a day. I still use the Headspace app. I just love the Headspace app. I still use that all the time. The next one then, so we're on number 3, is the imagination. So that's this piece about visualizing where it is that you're going. So for you, for the ski chalet, or me having that dinner in that hotel. The next thing then is what I call the daily review. So I want to be able to learn. I want to increase improve myself by a very small percentage every day. And I do that then by reviewing what happened yesterday with a few very simple questions. It takes about a minute to actually look back on yesterday and say, okay, what went well yesterday? What could have gone better yesterday? What do I need to do today to make it a 10 out of 10 day? And that daily review then makes sure that we're learning all the time and moving on. Then I've got movement, which is the exercise piece. So just whatever that exercise is for you, if it's, you know, running or swimming or dancing or whatever it is, you know, just get the body moving. It helps get the blood flow moving and all that focus that you talked about earlier on. Then I touched earlier on the daily planner, which is kind of planning out your tomorrow today, right? So making sure that you know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow, both in work and personal life, and getting that all down on paper so that it does a couple of things. Number one, when you walk out of your office, so I have mine done by 5 o'clock when I leave the office, it means that it frees my mind of everything that's going on tomorrow. So when I walk in home, I'm not thinking about, I got to do this and I got to do this. That's just gone. That's on paper somewhere, you know, taking a picture of it. I've sent it to Sean, who's my accountability partner. He knows I've done it, and otherwise he'll be checking in on me. But the other thing it does is, because I've written it down and I do it by hand, not using an app or anything like that, it's really important to write this like with a pen. It starts my subconscious mind kind of working on it. So while I'm concentrating on other things and family and sleeping and all that kind of thing, my mind subconsciously is working, okay, how are we going to do this tomorrow? And it's putting all the steps in place. So when I come into the office in the morning, I'm really focused. I know exactly what's going on. There's kind of an element of, I didn't know I was that far ahead in my planning, And then the other two things like fuel, which is your food. So just making sure that you eat for energy. Hydration then, as I said earlier on, that has a massive impact on our ability to focus and our energy. And then this accountability piece, which is this daily check-in that I do. For me, it's with my friend Sean. I check in with him every day. He knows that I'm on track. And then finally, you mentioned the sleep. I call that the early 8. So just making sure that we get our 8 hours of sleep. If you're gonna, I get up very early in the morning, which means I need to prioritize getting to bed early in the evening if I'm going to achieve that. So the 10 things that I call the daily 10. And I feel that if you do those 10 things, then you will achieve predictable success. That is all I feel we need to be accountable for then. We don't need to be accountable for a whole load of other stuff,
I think what this does a really good job of, which I hadn't seen in other books, was systematizing the whole process in a way that is repeatable. Like, you don't have to really think outside the square in terms of going through this process. I mean, there's plenty of trial and error that people have done. Success does leave clues. There are thousands and thousands of people all around the world that have got some sort of variation on a system like this. And this is a good starting point. You can start using it, working through it, find out about things that seem to resonate best with you. Maybe you're someone that gets enormous value out of meditation and you say that you want to do, 30 minutes or an hour of meditation every day. Or maybe you're like me who just does 10 minutes, or maybe you want to do just 5 minutes, or maybe that's not part of your plan, but you need to find a way where you can reap the rewards and get the benefits of what that is trying to do there. Because going back to what I've said a few times, success does leave clues. And everything you're seeing here is based on building predictable success. This has been really fascinating call here today, Rory, and I'm sure that our listeners would agree with that. We'd love to have you back again in the future to maybe dive a little bit deeper into some of these components and focus in on them. I think there's a lot more value that we could discuss there. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Aidan. And yeah, had to skip through, that stuff, especially the Daily 10 very quickly. And just the other thing on that, I mean, it sounds like a lot of stuff, but you know that it's actually not that much. It doesn't take that long to do it. So I wouldn't like people to be put off from doing it by thinking, oh, wow, 10 things. Because, you're already hydrating, you're already eating, you're already sleeping and all that kind of thing. It's just having a slightly different focus on that kind of stuff. So yeah, pleasure. Really enjoyed it, and love to come back again and dive into some stuff in more detail there.
Fantastic. And Rory, we will have a link to your book and your information along with this podcast on thegrowthbooth.com. So everyone will be able to get more information about you and what you do there. I do have a couple of questions for people to ponder as we finish up here. Do you think that you could perform better if you were able to modify or adjust what you are thinking about in your unconscious and subconscious mind? Do you think that you could change course or be more effective if you focused on that? And secondly, do you think that in some way your beliefs or your past experiences are limiting you? And if so, do you think it would be valuable to spend a little bit of time, 30 minutes, just working through with a pen and paper and sort of mapping out what you want to improve at, what you want to achieve in your life, what your vision could be? Because I think these are easy wins for people. You don't need to know much more than what we discussed here today. We've given you a few examples, and this is something that you can sit down for 20 or 30 minutes consciously thinking about what it is that you want to achieve and how you could get better at doing whatever is important to you in your life. So that's it for this episode. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you check out the show notes and tune in for the next one. I'm Aidan Booth, and this is The Growth Booth.